Hey, creative Christian, Jeremy here with your Author 2.0 insight, giving you some advice, some pro tips, some perspective for your author journey as a Christian creative, crafting amazing stories and studies and resources to ignite faith in your world. And today's tip, I hope, is both a sort of productivity hack, writing hack, as well as an encouragement for your journey as an author with the very precious resource called time. And time in relationship to words and the ideas you have to bring to life certain passion projects into the world in order to bless the world with thrilling entertainment, insightful resources for bringing God glory and human flourishing in the world. And this sort of productivity hack, as I call it, is the recognition that math is your friend when it comes to the process of writing and putting down words on the page in order to execute on this goal you have to write a book, whether it's a story, a novel, full-length novel, or a resource that will bless the world, give God glory, but also help people escape from the drudgery of their life, their job, the anxiety they have through a story, or help them manage their work as a leader, an executive, or manage their stress or anxiety as a student or a parent, or whatever it is that is the Lord has laid in your heart that you have a passion for. How do you birth that project from the blank page to the finished book and then the published book on the other side? The publishing part's one side of it. Of course, the one I want to talk to you today is the writing side, bringing it to life by putting in the work to write the story, the study, the resource. And to help give you perspective and also encouragement on that process, I want you to sort of focus on the very logical, mathematical side of writing. And this comes from a sort of well-known, well-worn phrase that I've heard stretching back decades when it comes to tackling goals and projects generally, but especially when it comes to writing. And that's this idea of, how do you eat an elephant? This big, massive beast, right? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. That's how you eat an elephant. That's how you tackle eating a massive beast in this sort of very silly analogy here. But how do you then tackle this big, monstrous goal in the writing sense of writing a book? You have 1 million people who aspire to write a book, all right? Probably 10% of those will actually follow through with that goal. So that brings down that million down to 100,000 people. 100,000 people are actually going to set their fingers to the keyboard and actually begin that process of writing that book. Well, probably another 10% are actually going to finish the book. So that's another 90,000 are taken out of commission. So how do you become that 10,000? How do you become the writer who becomes an author, who starts with a blank page, who finishes the book? It's tackling that massive writing project, one word at a time, one writing session at a time. And math is your best friend to tackling that project. And to illustrate, whether you're a fiction writer or not, there is this sort of movement, you could call it, but it's a a challenge that comes around every November called National Novel Writing Month. NaNoWriMo is the way that people like me, fiction writers, have referred to that challenge. NaNoWriMo.org. You can get more information for yourself if you're interested. But the idea with the challenge is to write a 50,000-word novel in 30 days. That sounds crazy. How do you write a whole book, a novel, a whole story in 30 days, in a month, especially with the Thanksgiving festivities, which does bring a bit of a challenge to the challenge, fitting in the writing sessions with all of those, at least in the US, the Thanksgiving national holiday, right? But if you just sort of step back and take the challenge at its face value, you could you could manufacture your own challenge by writing your own book, a novel, a resource, in 30 days. How on earth do you do that? How do you tackle it? This is where math comes into play. Because in this sense, with National Novel Writing Month, you're writing 50,000 words in 30 days. The 50,000 words is a smaller form novel, which actually used to be the actual size of most novels during the way back pulp era and the sort of high tide of traditional publishing during the 60s, 70s, 80s, before it became more of this corporate thing that these major publishers had to expand the size of the novel book in order to charge more. And in order to expand that book size, they had to add words, right? To send the story down rabbit trails in order to sort of pad the story in order to be able to charge more. That began happening during this three-quarters of the century mark in the 20th century, during the traditional publishing era. But for the majority of the high tide of novel writing, novel publishing, they were around 50,000 words, 60,000 words. And so the movement is sought to sort of bring that back around to this traditional novel size. And so that's the goal. Most traditional resources, if you look at most Christian resources, Christian Living, or other sort of books you might find in the nonfiction world for business leaders, productivity, managing your health, anxiety, whatever that might be, that's a good target, 50,000 words. If you sign a traditional publishing contract, that's going to be around the target, okay? So anyway, 50,000 words. How do you do that in 30 days? Well, you divide the 50,000 words by 30, and you come up with your per day word count, around 1,666 words a day. Let's just round up to 1,700 words a day, okay? That's the goal. That's the writing goal. That's how many words you need to write a day in order to finish the challenge and have your 50, 60,000 word book manuscript done and dusted on the other side, okay? And if you take seriously this goal of not writing sloppy along the way, which unfortunately NaNoWriMo tends to actually encourage, they say just get the words out, you can polish it up and edit it up on the other side. Yeah, sort of. My encouragement to you is cycle along the way, go backwards around 500 words, maybe the chapter, read through that, pick it up, polish along the way, fix mistakes, the story plot holes, or the grammatical or punctuation or typing mistakes, word choice mistakes, whatever that might be. Do the editing along the way so that at the end you have a mostly finished, polished draft that you can then read through once, get it off to a proofreader, and set it sailing into the world. But if you look at it this way, if you take that big elephant, the novel, the story, the resource, 60,000 words, you bring it down to the word count per day, it's a lot easier to manage, isn't it? And if you know how many words you can write per hour, then you know how much time it will take each day to execute on this very worthy goal of writing a book in a month, a novel in this case, a story, or that study or resource you have. Right now, I'm about ready to launch into my next novel writing project that will take me around 82,000 words or so, a legal thriller that I'm super excited to begin writing, and I've figured out it'll probably take around 82, maybe 85,000 words. And I have a goal to finish it by the middle to end of June in order to then launch a crowdfunding project for this story set in a universe, my Mill Creek Junction sort of small town short story universe that I've written a number of mostly short stories in, but I've also weaved in a few novels from my other series. And I'd like to launch this story world, my small town story world that has a number of more inspirational stories that are a bit outside my normal thriller, science fiction sort of genres that I write in. And I thought this would be a cool way to launch that. So I have this goal of writing this book middle of June in order to then set it out into the world to give it to my crowdfunding supporters in July, middle to end of July, having edited it on the other side of writing it and then getting it off to my proofreader and then sending it out into the world. So I did some math on that. Around 42 days I have if I'm writing Monday through Saturday, and the math works out to be 1980 or 1930, just under 2,000 words a day. If I write a little bit less, if I write a little bit more, that'll average out to be around 2,000 words in order to tackle this big elephant, eat this big elephant, execute on my goal to write this book middle of June. And a pretty decent size, reader expected size novel for this genre, legal thrillers. Totally doable. I know I can write around 1,000 words an hour, depending on what's going on in the day and what's going on in my head. I have the privilege, the blessing of being able to do that during the day, given my full-time-ish writing career and the nature of my life as a sort of also stay-at-home dad, caring for my kids and getting them off to school and seeing them come back to school and working with them on their projects when they come home. And anyway, so my life allows me to do some of that during the day. I also have some other business responsibilities, and so I'll probably do some of that in the evening after dinner, in which I know if I put on a vintage jazz vinyl record, I can pound out in those 42 minutes or so 700 to 800 words. It's I have a few go-to albums that I slip on the turntable, and my brain just sort of dials into the story. And I know that if I have a writing session like that, in the evening I can make up anything that I am not able to get to during the day. But I know that not everyone can do that. Not everyone has the blessing of being able to write during the, for me, it's the mid-morning hour. That's when I'm most creative, when I sit down, have my block of 2 hours to just write. But you know when you have those moments. You maybe have a lunch hour, an hour there where you can sit down and write, or a half hour in the morning, or that hour when the kids go to bed before you yourself go to bed. And instead of watching a Netflix rerun, you can sit down and write. And maybe you can write 800 words or 1,000 words. So if you have a few of those writing sessions, those blocks, and you put those together, how many can you write? How many words can you write a day? Add those up, and then you see how many stories or studies you could write in a quarter or in a year. If you think about it, a few of those 82,000 word novels in my case, that adds up. I could easily do 3 to 4 of those a year if I just spend a month and a half, let's just say 2 months, 2 months a year, or 2 months in a block, writing 4 novels a year. That's what? 8 months a year writing. And then if I then spend a month editing, sending that off to a proofreader, polishing up and fixing any mistakes, that's basically one 85,000 word novel a quarter. 4 of those a year. That's a pretty decent writing pace, far more than many of the traditionally published fiction writers who are dialed into the 1 novel a year, or maybe 2 for some of the big dogs. Like, John Grisham, I'm reading one of his legal thrillers now, and he tends to write one for the summer season and then the fall, winter, Christmas season. So that's around 2 novels a year. John Grisham. Stephen King seems to do the same, and many of the other popular writers, okay? So for them, their pace is two books a year. Many of us could do that pretty easily, even with all the craziness of church volunteer responsibilities, work responsibilities, home responsibilities, carting your kids off to sports practice, ballet practice, which I'm in the throes of right now, my wife and I. Life has gotten complicated. So for me to figure out, how do I write those 1,930 words a day? I do the math, I figure out my blocks of time, and I know if I have this goal to start today, and then to finish it mid-June, what I need to do and write in order to finish and execute on that goal. That's the benefit and the friendship, if you put it in those terms, of math for you as a writer. So my encouragement to you is, if you have this big goal to write a book, whatever that is, a novel, a story, a study, a resource, how many words or so do you think that will take? When do you want to write it? When is that end date, that deadline for the goal? How many words can you write a day? And then where in your schedule can you find the time to write in order to execute on this goal, in order to love your neighbor by helping your neighbor, being useful to your neighbor, and bringing glory to God through your passion project, igniting faith in your world? Sit down, figure that out today. Figure out the blocks of time where you can sit down and write, using math as your friend to bless the world, to bring glory to God with your passion project.